Marissa, a young Filipina receptionist chasing dreams in Dubai, and Kareem, a respected hotel manager with everything to lose. What began as a secret affair between them soon spiraled into blackmail, betrayal, and murder. Behind the luxury walls of a five-star hotel, their hidden choices set the stage for a crime that would shock everyone who thought they knew them. Marissa's life in the Philippines had always been modest. She grew up in a small town where opportunities were scarce, and every peso mattered. Her family relied on her strength and determination, and when the chance came to work abroad, she didn't hesitate. Dubai, with its shining skyline and promises of good wages, seemed like the doorway to a better future. She left home with a mixture of excitement and fear, carrying with her the dreams of her parents and siblings. The hotel where she was hired was unlike anything she had ever seen. Marble floors gleamed under golden lights, expensive perfumes filled the air, and guests arrived in luxury cars from every corner of the world. Marissa's job as a receptionist placed her at the very front of this glamorous stage. Every day, she greeted strangers with a polite smile, checking them in, answering their questions, and making them feel welcome. Behind the desk, she stood with perfect posture, looking confident, even though she often battled the weight of loneliness in her heart. For many, Dubai was a city of endless opportunities, but for Marissa, it was also a place of quiet isolation. Far from her family and friends, she lived in a shared apartment with other workers who barely had time to talk after long shifts. At night, when she returned from the hotel, the silence of her small room reminded her of the sacrifices she had made. Yet she never complained. She told herself she was strong, and that everything she endured was for the future she hoped to build. Every morning, as she put on her uniform, she promised herself that one day, her hard work would be worth it. Would you like me to expand each chapter to this detailed length one by one, or just highlight the most dramatic ones like Chapter 6 and Chapter 8? Kareem was the kind of man who commanded attention without saying much. As the hotel manager, he moved through the lobby with quiet authority, inspecting every detail, from the arrangement of flowers to the tone of the staff's greetings. Marissa admired him from a distance at first, noticing how guests respected him and how employees scrambled to meet his expectations. For a young woman far from home, his confidence seemed magnetic, and slowly, her admiration grew into something she tried to hide. Their first private conversations were innocent, just brief exchanges about work. But soon, Kareem began to linger near the front desk longer than necessary. He would compliment her efficiency, sometimes offering advice about how to handle demanding guests. Marissa told herself it was just kindness, but deep down, she knew his attention was different. The hotel was a place of constant activity, but within that chaos, small glances and subtle gestures became their secret language. When their relationship crossed the line into something more, Marissa felt both exhilarated and terrified. Kareem was married, a fact she could never ignore, but he made her feel noticed in a city where she often felt invisible. Their meetings were carefully hidden, tucked away in moments when no one else was watching. To the outside world, she was just another receptionist. Behind the curtain, however, she was entangled in a dangerous secret. Marissa convinced herself she could keep the affair under control, that no one would find out. But deep inside, she knew the risks were enormous. In a conservative society where private choices could have severe consequences, their secret was a ticking clock. What began as excitement would soon become the first step into a chain of events she could never escape. It started with small suspicions that something was not quite right. The hotel was a place where secrets rarely stayed hidden for long, and Marissa and Kareem's careful attempts at discretion did not go unnoticed. Two staff members, both struggling with debts and desperate for quick money, became curious after observing Marissa's unusual routines. She sometimes lingered in corridors where she had no reason to be, and her phone would light up late at night with messages she rushed to hide. One evening, while reviewing shift records, a housekeeper noticed Marissa had stayed far longer than required in an unused part of the hotel. Another staff member saw Kareem leaving the same hallway minutes later. Neither said anything immediately, but the seed of suspicion grew. Soon, they began watching her closely, waiting for confirmation of their theory. What they discovered was more than enough to set their plan in motion. It was not difficult for them to gather proof. A misplaced receipt, an overheard phone call, and glimpses of the manager's car parked outside the staff quarters at odd hours gave them all the evidence they needed. They realized the truth. The receptionist and the manager were secretly involved. Instead of reporting it, they saw an opportunity. The two began whispering to each other about what this information could bring. In their eyes, Marissa was not just a colleague anymore. She was leverage. They knew her reputation, her job, and perhaps even her freedom could be destroyed if the affair came to light. The idea of blackmail formed quickly, fueled by greed and resentment. What Marissa thought was a carefully hidden secret had already slipped into the hands of those who saw her vulnerability as a weapon. The threats did not arrive all at once. At first, Marissa found a folded note slipped under her locker door. The handwriting was messy, but the message was chillingly clear. "We know about you and the manager. Pay us if you want to keep your job." She froze as she read it, her hands trembling. For hours, she debated whether it was just a cruel prank. But the second note, left on her reception desk when she turned away for a moment, removed all doubt. This time, it included a demand for cash. Marissa's mind raced with fear. If the affair became public, the consequences would be devastating. She could lose her job, be deported, or worse. The hotel prided itself on its image, and a scandal would destroy her. With no one to confide in, she quietly withdrew part of her salary and handed it over as instructed. She convinced herself it would end there, that the blackmailers would be satisfied with one payment. But the demands only grew harsher. Each time she paid, another note appeared, demanding more. They asked for money she didn't have, forcing her to borrow from colleagues under the guise of family emergencies. Nights that were once filled with cautious excitement spent waiting for Kareem's calls turned into sleepless hours of panic. She lived in constant fear of exposure, her every step shadowed by the possibility that her secret would explode into the open. The blackmailers, emboldened by her silence, pushed further. They knew she was trapped, and with every demand, they tightened their grip. What had begun as a dangerous but thrilling affair was now suffocating her. Marissa, once hopeful and ambitious, found herself cornered by a secret she could no longer control. Marissa's breaking point came when the blackmail demands became impossible to meet. Her entire paycheck was no longer enough, and the threats grew sharper. One note warned that if she failed to deliver the next payment, her affair with Kareem would be exposed to the hotel's owners. Panicked and exhausted, she realized she could no longer fight alone. Desperate, she turned to the only person she thought could save her, the man at the center of it all. When she finally told Kareem about the blackmail, she expected shock, anger, maybe even guilt. Instead, his reaction left her shattered. Kareem listened in silence, then made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with her problem. His reputation, his marriage, and his career were more important to him than her safety. He refused to intervene, refused to pay, and insisted she find her own way out. To him, she was simply a liability, someone who could destroy everything he had built. Marissa felt abandoned in the cruelest way. The man who once made her feel valued now turned his back when she needed him most. She replayed every promise he had made, every tender moment, and realized how quickly they vanished when the risk became too high. His betrayal cut deeper than the threats of the blackmailers. For the first time since arriving in Dubai, Marissa truly felt powerless. She had sacrificed so much to be there, endured loneliness and fear, and given her trust to someone who left her stranded in the darkest moment of her life. The weight of her choices pressed heavily on her chest, and the walls around her seemed to close in tighter every day. The affair that once filled her with excitement had transformed into a trap she could not escape. The night of the final meeting was set with precision. Marissa received another note, this time demanding she bring what little money she had left to a deserted section of the hotel. The blackmailers promised it would be the last payment, a clean end to the nightmare. Exhausted and frightened, she convinced herself that giving them what they wanted might finally set her free. The storage wing where they told her to come was silent, far from the glittering lobby and the bustle of guests. Its dim lights and long, echoing corridors carried an eerie sense of isolation. Marissa walked with the envelope clutched tightly in her hand, her heart pounding louder with every step. She wanted nothing more than to end the torment and return to her normal routine, but fate had already closed its grip around her. When she reached the room, the blackmailers were waiting. Their voices were sharp, their faces twisted with impatience. The envelope she handed over was thinner than they expected, and in that moment, the fragile balance broke. They accused her of hiding money, of playing games, and the argument turned violent. What began as shouting quickly escalated to pushing, then striking. The storage room, once a place for supplies, became the stage for her final struggle. In the chaos, Marissa fought to break free, but she was outnumbered and overpowered. The encounter spiraled beyond control, and when it was over, the silence was suffocating. Her body lay crumpled against the cold floor, her phone missing, the envelope of money torn open beside her. The blackmailers fled, leaving behind a scene that spoke of desperation, greed, and cruelty. Hours later, a security guard discovered her lifeless form, and the entire hotel would wake to a scandal they could not ignore. The discovery of Marissa's body sent shockwaves through the hotel. Staff whispered in hushed voices, guests were quietly moved to other areas, and the management scrambled to contain the scandal. But the police wasted no time. The storage room was sealed off, and forensic teams combed through every corner for clues. The sight was grim. Marissa's uniform torn, bruises marking her arms, and her phone missing, a clear sign that whoever attacked her had tried to erase evidence. Investigators began by reviewing security footage. The hotel's cameras revealed a chilling timeline. At midnight, Marissa was seen walking nervously toward the restricted wing, clutching a small envelope. Minutes later, 2 employees followed in the same direction. None of them appeared again until the suspects were caught leaving much later, their faces tense, their steps hurried. The camera never captured Marissa's exit. That was all the police needed to narrow their search. When officers raided the suspects' apartments, the puzzle pieces quickly fell into place. Hidden under clothes and inside drawers, they found Marissa's missing belongings. A scarf she had worn that evening, torn fragments of the threatening notes, and an envelope with cash still inside. The handwriting matched the notes discovered earlier in the hotel. It was undeniable proof that the blackmailers had crossed the line into murder. Kareem was also brought in for questioning. Rumors swirled among the staff, and investigators wanted to know if his affair had any role in the crime. He admitted nothing, portraying himself as uninvolved, and without physical evidence tying him to the killing. The focus remained firmly on the 2 employees. As the truth unraveled, the story transformed from whispers of an affair into a full-scale tragedy of greed, betrayal, and violence. The courtroom was heavy with tension when the trial began. The 2 accused staff members sat side by side, their expressions shifting between defiance and fear. Prosecutors laid out the evidence with methodical precision. The security footage, the recovered belongings, the notes demanding money, and the testimony of colleagues who had noticed their suspicious behavior. Piece by piece, the story of Marissa's last night came alive, exposing the cruel greed that had stolen her life. The defense tried to argue that the death had been accidental, the result of a confrontation that went too far. But the bruises on Marissa's body, the missing phone, and the deliberate attempts to cover up the crime painted a darker truth. The judges were unmoved by pleas for leniency. When the verdict was finally delivered, both blackmailers were sentenced to decades in prison, their future locked away as punishment for their ruthless choices. Kareem, though never charged, walked away with his reputation scarred. Whispers about his affair circulated quietly among staff, and though management never confirmed it, suspicion lingered. He returned to work, but the same authority he once commanded was gone. To many, he was a man who had abandoned someone he should have protected, and no amount of denial could erase that stain. Marissa's body was flown back to the Philippines, where her grieving family waited. At the airport, her coffin was received with tears and silence. The young woman who had left with dreams of building a better life returned as a victim of betrayal and violence. Neighbors and relatives spoke of her ambition, her sacrifice, and the cruel fate that ended her journey. Her story became a warning, whispered among those who dreamed of working abroad, a reminder of how dangerous secrets can spiral into tragedy when trust is misplaced and greed takes control.